Hi, my name is Hannah, and I'm 28 years old. If you'd met me a few months ago, you would have called me the dependable one, the person who kept things running while everyone else posed for photos. I was the quiet fixer in a loud house. When the Wi-Fi mysteriously kept working, when the lights never missed a beat, when my dad Thomas had a rough patch and the mortgage somehow stayed current, that was me. When my sister Ashley raved about her private classes and never worried about tuition deadlines, that was me too. I didn't make announcements. I didn't ask for applause. I believed keeping the peace meant keeping my mouth shut. The day everything snapped looked harmless from the outside. A warm Sunday, pale sunshine on the curtains, a table dressed up with pastel balloons and sparkling glasses for Ashley's birthday brunch. She'd hired a photographer just to capture the candid moments that are never actually candid, and I did what I always do, filled glasses, fixed napkins, smiled through the noise. My mom, Margaret, floated from guest to guest, bragging about Ashley's plans. My dad kept close to the coffee, avoiding conversations that might ask too much of him. I told myself I could make it through a few hours and then retreat to my room with a book. Halfway through, the room went tinny and hollow, the way a hallway sounds when a door slams. Ashley tapped her glass and stood, chin high, actress ready. "Before we keep celebrating," she said, "there's something we have to address." Everyone turned. She looked straight at me. Hannah took my diamond ring. The words clanged like metal on tile. She added the part that made forks freeze, the one worth 9,000. There was a hush so thick I could hear my own breathing, too fast and too loud. I laughed, one small, stupid, reflexive breath of disbelief, because the accusation was wild. But no one laughed with me. Margaret's mouth shaped itself into a knowing line. I knew this jealousy would come out someday. Thomas stared into his cup like answers lived at the bottom. A cousin murmured, "Are you serious?" A photographer kept clicking because scandal makes great content. I opened my mouth to say, "No," to say, "What are you talking about?" to say anything at all, and nothing came out. It's astonishing how quickly your voice deserts you when you become the defendant in your own home. Ashley didn't stop there. She said she'd found the ring box in my dresser. She said she'd been searching for weeks. She said the word stole like she'd rehearsed it in a mirror. I felt the floor tilt. I hadn't touched her ring. I hadn't even wanted it. I wanted a family that treated truth like a standard, not a prop. But in that living room, truth had no microphone. The verdict was the expression on everyone's faces, guilty by convenience. By evening, the celebration had wilted into whispers and pointed looks. Margaret told me I should give us space and leave for a while. Thomas didn't argue. He didn't even look at me. Ashley stood in the doorframe with her arms folded, as if she were guarding a vault I'd broken open. I packed fast, one overnight bag, charger, a jacket I barely felt myself putting on. I didn't bother with long explanations. The people who wanted to believe me wouldn't need a speech. The people who didn't wouldn't hear it. Outside, the air smelled like rain though the sky was clear. I sent a single message to Amanda, my friend who never asks for proof of pain. "Can I crash for a couple of nights?" Her reply came in under a minute. "Of course. I'll leave the porch light on." That tiny sentence loosened something tight in my chest. I slid into a rideshare with the world's longest 10-minute drive, watching the neighborhood roll by through a fogged window, the houses I'd helped keep warm, the street I'd learned to bike on, the life I'd been paying for like a silent sponsor. When I reached Amanda's, the porch bulb threw a small circle of mercy on the steps. Inside, her place smelled like laundry and cinnamon, the opposite of a staged brunch. No cameras, no speeches. I set my bag down and sat on the edge of her sofa, hands still shaking, listening to the ordinary sounds of a good apartment. A kettle, a TV low in the other room, a friend moving around without tiptoeing. I should have cried. I didn't. The ache was too sharp to liquefy. Somewhere under the shock, another feeling stirred. Something clear and steady. I had been the scaffolding no one noticed. Without me, the structure would finally have to stand on its own. I didn't know yet how quickly the cracks would show. I didn't know who had really touched the ring, or what kind of proof would surface, or how far the consequences would travel. I just knew one thing as I stared at the ceiling in the dark. Being thrown out isn't always a loss. Sometimes it's a lever. And someone had just pulled mine. The first morning at Amanda's felt like stepping into borrowed silence. I woke up on her pull-out couch, the kind with a bar in the middle that usually digs into your back, but I didn't care. It was the most peaceful sleep I'd had in months. No slamming doors. No sharp voices echoing down the hall. No walking on eggshells around Ashley's moods. Just the hum of a kettle and Amanda's cat pawing lazily at the carpet. For a moment, I thought maybe the nightmare of the night before had been just that, a nightmare. Then my phone buzzed. It wasn't a good morning text or even a half-hearted apology. It was a group chat notification. Ashley had posted a dramatic caption under a photo from her brunch. Some people can't stand to see you shine, so they try to steal it. But truth always wins. The comments underneath were full of sympathy emojis, affirmations, and congratulations for being so strong. I stared at the screen, stunned. She wasn't content with humiliating me once in our living room. She wanted the entire internet to join the trial. I put the phone down, but it vibrated again within minutes. This time it was Margaret. Her text was short, clipped, and brutal. "We'll pack up what you need. Don't come back until you're ready to admit what you did." My chest went tight. Admit what I did? I hadn't done anything. But to them, my guilt was easier to believe than my innocence. Amanda poured me coffee, watched my face, and didn't ask questions. That's what real friends do. They don't make you relive the wound while it's still bleeding. She just said, "Stay as long as you need." And I knew I would. I wasn't going to crawl back to a house where lies were currency. By the third day, the first cracks appeared. A message came through from Thomas, my father, in a tone I hadn't heard in years, uncertain. "Hannah, something's wrong with the accounts. The electric company keeps calling, and Ashley says her tuition portal is locked. Can you call me?" For once, he didn't sound like a judge. He sounded like a man standing in a storm without an umbrella. I almost laughed. Of course he didn't understand. He'd never realized I'd been the one holding every wire together. I ignored the call. But inside me, a decision snapped into place. For 4 years, I had paid their bills. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, even Margaret's salon visits when she claimed her card wasn't working. I had wired tuition straight to Ashley's college account while she posted photos captioned, "Daddy's favorite." I had poured myself out until I was dry. And for what? To be called a thief. To be thrown out without a suitcase. That night, I opened my laptop, fingers trembling not with fear, but with focus. One by one, I logged into every account tied to their comfort. The mortgage autopay, the gas bill, the internet, Ashley's tuition. One by one, I shut them down. Not a note, not a warning, not even a farewell email. Just silence where there used to be rescue. If they wanted me gone, they would get the full measure of it. The next few days rolled by like watching dominoes fall. Day 6, a voicemail from Margaret, furious, accusing me of cutting them off and trying to ruin Ashley's future. Day 8, an email from Ashley's school about overdue balances, somehow forwarded to me as if I'd leaped to fix it. Day 10, the message that almost made me laugh out loud, Ashley herself, in all caps. "Did you cancel the electricity? The power's out. Internet's dead too. Fix this. Fix this." As though I were still in the next room, notebook in hand, ready to erase her mistakes. I didn't reply. Instead, I sat in Amanda's small apartment with its cracked tiles and secondhand sofa and felt something I hadn't felt in years, freedom. But freedom is a fragile thing, and secrets don't stay buried. Because only a few days later, proof landed in my lap, proof that Ashley had never expected anyone to hear. The message came late at night, just as I was closing my laptop. A notification lit up my phone with a name I hadn't seen in months, Rebecca, our neighbor from 2 doors down. She'd been like a quiet guardian when Ashley and I were kids, a woman who babysat us when Margaret and Thomas were too busy, the kind of neighbor who always waved even when no one else bothered. My first instinct was to ignore it. I didn't want pity, not from anyone who might have heard Ashley's lies. But the preview froze me. Hannah, I need to show you something. I have proof she lied. My hands went cold. I opened the message. An audio clip waited inside, the little waveform bouncing like a heartbeat. I pressed play. Laughter, music, chatter. The sounds of Ashley's birthday brunch spilled out first. Then, clear as daylight, Ashley's voice sharpened through the noise. Of course I planted it in her drawer. I had to make everyone see her for what she really is. Mom's always saying Hannah acts so perfect. Well, let's see how perfect she looks when she's kicked out. I sat frozen, phone heavy in my hand. My ears rang, my skin prickled. There it was, confession, casual and cruel, recorded without her knowing. She'd framed me. She'd staged the whole thing. She wanted me humiliated, and my parents had swallowed a whole. Rebecca's next message followed fast. I was recording in the backyard for a photo shoot. My mic picked it up. I didn't even notice until I played it back yesterday. I'm so sorry for what she did. I've already sent the clip to her university. Someone like her shouldn't get away with this. I couldn't move for a long time. Relief, rage, vindication, they crashed over me like waves. I wanted to scream, to cry, to storm into my parents' house and shove the phone under their noses. But I didn't. I didn't have to. The truth had its own legs now. 3 days later, the silence around Ashley's Instagram said more than words. The constant flood of brunch selfies and designer handbags vanished overnight. In their place, nothing. No posts, no stories. Just a blank profile and a girl who had finally run out of captions. Whispers traveled faster than posts ever could. By the end of the week, her classmates knew. The clip had circulated through group chats, then forums, then the wider student body. Professors looked at her differently. Classmates who once worshipped her started avoiding her. The golden child was tarnished in real time, and I didn't lift a finger. Margaret's Facebook, once a shrine of family bragging, turned into a wall of vague, pitiful quotes about betrayal and the cruelty of lies. My father, Thomas, stopped calling altogether. Ashley tried damage control. She posted a long note about family misunderstandings, complete with a black and white crying selfie. She turned off comments, but it was too late. The truth had been planted, and this time, no one could dig it out. Then came the final blow. A letter from Ashley's university suspended her for academic dishonesty and code of conduct violations. Not only for framing me, but because, unknown to me, she'd already been caught plagiarizing a paper the semester before. She had slipped once and been forgiven. This time, she fell hard. At home, panic spread like mold. Thomas sat in silence, drinking coffee as though it might fill the silence in his chest. Margaret spiraled between fury and despair. Ashley's sobs leaked through closed doors. And me? I stayed where I was, in Amanda's apartment, far from the wreckage. For years I'd been their safety net. Now they had to feel the ground. But the storm wasn't finished. Another truth was waiting, one I never could have guessed, one that would change everything about how I saw my family. The truth found me when I least expected it. I'd just settled into a rhythm at Amanda's, working, paying my own bills without carrying the weight of 3 extra people, breathing air that felt mine. Then one evening, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something nudged me to pick up. Hannah. The voice was warm, tentative. Sweetheart, it's Gloria. It took me a moment to place her. My mother's older sister. The relative who had vanished from family gatherings years ago after some mysterious fight. My parents always said she was jealous, unstable, better off forgotten. But her voice wasn't unstable, it was steady and oddly gentle. I've been following what happened, she said softly. And I think it's time you knew the truth. My pulse quickened. What truth? There was a pause, the kind that feels like standing at the edge of a cliff. Your grandmother, your dad's mother, left you something when she passed. A trust fund. It was written specifically for you, Hannah. Just you. I gripped the phone tighter. That can't be right. No one ever told me. They didn't want you to know, Gloria interrupted. After she died, they convinced the lawyer not to notify you. Said you were too young, that they'd manage it until you were older. But it was never theirs to keep. It was meant for your future. The room spun. How much? She hesitated, then said it clearly. $120,000. I sank back into the couch, stunned. While I'd been scraping every paycheck to cover their bills, while I sacrificed vacations, hobbies, even new shoes, they'd been hiding a fortune that belonged to me. My parents hadn't just betrayed me with words, they had stolen my future. Gloria must have sensed the storm in my silence. I ran into the lawyer recently. He thought you'd known all along. When I realized you hadn't, I couldn't stay quiet. You deserve what's yours. The next week was a blur of calls, signatures, and legal confirmations. Gloria stood by me through it all. When the lawyer finally transferred the trust into my name, I stared at the balance on the screen, hands trembling. It was real. Every dollar they'd buried was now in my hands. For the first time in years, I wasn't just free, I was armed. And with that money, I didn't think of revenge. I thought of justice. I thought of building something that would outlast every cruel word, every slammed door, every lie. The path forward had revealed itself. Not silence, not bitterness, but a story told on my terms. I was going to write it all down. Every betrayal, every sacrifice, every triumph. And I would turn the pain into something unshakable. That night, with the city lights flickering outside Amanda's window, I opened a blank document and typed the first line of what would become my book. The first line came easily, like it had been waiting inside me all along. They called me a thief, but I was the one keeping the lights on. My fingers shook as I typed, but I didn't stop. Words poured out of me. Nights at the kitchen table paying bills in secret, the way Margaret rolled her eyes when I asked her to cut back on expenses, the smug smile on Ashley's face as she waved her designer bags, the silence of Thomas that cut deeper than any insult. For years, I had swallowed it all. Now I was spitting it back out, one page at a time. What started as a journal turned into chapters. Chapters turned into a manuscript. Amanda would peek into the room, finding me hunched over my laptop at 2 a.m., eyes burning, coffee cold beside me. "You're on fire," she'd whisper, half proud, half worried. And she was right. I was burning, but the fire wasn't destroying me. It was shaping me. When the manuscript was finished, I held it like something sacred. I titled it, Buried in Lies. Submitting it to publishers felt terrifying, like tossing my heart into a pit and waiting for strangers to decide if it was worth keeping. Weeks passed. Then the call came. A mid-sized publisher wanted it. They didn't just want it, they loved it. The months that followed blurred into edits, meetings, and cover designs. When the book finally launched, I walked into a bookstore and saw my name, Hannah, on a glossy cover stacked in neat rows. My throat tightened. I wasn't invisible anymore. Reviews came quickly, and the story spread faster than I expected. People, mostly women, some men too, wrote to me. "This is my life." I thought I was the only one. Your story gave me courage. Within weeks, sales soared. Then it happened. The words every writer dreams of, bestseller. But the book wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Invitations started arriving, podcasts, interviews, panels. Someone suggested I give a talk at a women's leadership conference. I stood on that stage, hands trembling at first, and told my story not as a victim, but as a survivor. When the applause thundered, something inside me shifted. I had found my voice, and I wasn't going to lose it again. While my world expanded, my parents' world shrank. The house grew colder, mortgage unpaid, utilities disconnected. Ashley, once the golden child, was now a whisper, her name attached to scandal and suspension. They tried to salvage their image, but reputations aren't as easy to pay off as bills. One afternoon, months after the book launch, I received a message from Margaret. Just 5 words. "Can we please talk, Hannah?" I stared at it, expressionless. Once, those words would have pulled me home in an instant. Now, they meant nothing. My story was already out there, unchangeable. I didn't need her version anymore. I closed the message without replying. I wasn't cruel. I just wasn't theirs to manipulate anymore. And as I prepared for my next speaking event, I realized something profound. Their betrayal hadn't destroyed me, it had uncovered me. The first time I walked onto a stage with hundreds of faces looking up at me, I thought my knees might give out. The spotlight felt heavier than any burden I had carried at home. But the moment I opened my mouth, the fear melted. I spoke about the night I was accused, the silence that followed, and the way I rebuilt my life piece by piece. The audience leaned in, their eyes wide, their pens scratching down notes. When I finished, the standing ovation thundered through me like a second heartbeat. That single talk opened a floodgate. Invitations from universities, women's groups, even corporate events poured in. They didn't just want my story, they wanted the strength behind it. I became known not as the girl accused of stealing, but as Hannah, the voice of resilience. My calendar filled, my income grew, and most importantly, I finally felt that I mattered on my own terms. Meanwhile, the echoes of my old life kept reaching me through whispers from distant relatives. Thomas looked older than his years, worn down by debt and silence. Margaret drifted between bitterness and regret, her once proud voice quieter now. And Ashley, the girl who framed me, struggled to claw her way back online with rebranded accounts about self-growth and healing. But the internet remembers. Her followers dwindled, her collaborations dried up. She had been the golden child once, but gold that's fake always tarnishes. Sometimes late at night, I wondered if they watched me. If they sat in their living room, scrolling through articles about my book-topping charts, or tuning into a live stream of one of my talks. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But the beauty was that it no longer mattered. I thought about replying to Margaret's message, about offering some neat closure tied up with forgiveness. But forgiveness is not the same as forgetting, and forgetting is not the same as healing. My healing came not from going back, but from moving so far forward that the past couldn't catch me. One evening, after a conference, a young woman approached me with tears in her eyes. "Your story saved me," she whispered. "I finally left a toxic home because of your book." She hugged me like I had pulled her from a burning building. That was the moment I understood. My pain had become someone else's roadmap. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the girl who lost a family. I felt like the woman who built a life. Nearly a year had passed since that Sunday brunch, when my world collapsed and then rebuilt itself. I lived now in a downtown apartment with tall windows that caught the sunrise and spilled it across my desk every morning. The shelves behind me held copies of Buried in Lies, my book that refused to leave the bestseller list. Each spine was a reminder that truth, once spoken, can't be silenced again. Every day felt different from the life I once knew. Instead of rushing to pay someone else's overdue bills, I spent mornings answering emails from readers who saw themselves in my story. Afternoons were filled with planning my next talks, traveling to new cities, meeting people who carried the same invisible wounds I once carried. At night, I wrote again, not from pain this time, but from purpose. News of my family reached me like faint echoes. Thomas had finally sold the old house after months of overdue payments. Margaret avoided neighbors who once admired her. Ashley, once the social butterfly, now lived in a cocoon of obscurity. I didn't celebrate their downfall, but I didn't mourn it either. They had chosen lies over love, and lies have a way of collapsing under their own weight. Sometimes I wondered if they watched me from the sidelines. If they saw the headlines about my talks, or glimpsed my interviews on television. Maybe they sat in silence, realizing too late that the daughter they had thrown away was the one who kept their world afloat. But if they did, I hoped they learned the lesson. When you betray someone who holds everything together, you don't just lose them. You lose the life they carried for you. I never replied to Margaret's message. Not because I hated her, but because I no longer needed her validation. I had built a stage higher than their judgment, a platform that turned my voice into something unshakable. Forgiveness, if it ever came, would not be for them. It would be for me. And maybe one day I'd find it. But not yet. As I prepared for another keynote event, I looked at my reflection in the mirror. A woman who had been called a thief, a liar, a disgrace. Yet here she was holding a microphone, standing tall, proof that betrayal doesn't define you, what you build after does. And I knew then, the best revenge isn't rage or even justice. It's success that shines too brightly to be ignored. 1 full year after being thrown out with nothing but a bag and a broken heart, I stood backstage at a sold-out auditorium. My name, Hannah Miller, flashed on the screen in bold letters above the words best-selling author and motivational speaker. The murmur of the crowd reached me like a low tide, steady and expectant. I thought about the girl I had been, the quiet provider, the invisible backbone of a family that never saw me. And then I thought about the woman I had become, the storyteller, the fighter, the voice others leaned on when their own broke. When I stepped onto that stage, the applause rose like thunder. It was not just for my book or my talks or the lessons I taught. It was for survival. For every person who had been silenced in their own home, accused of sins they never committed, used until they broke. I told them what I wish someone had told me years ago. Walking away isn't weakness. It's the first step towards strength. Afterward, as I signed copies of Buried in Lies, people pressed my hand and whispered thank you, tears shining in their eyes. Each thank you stitched up a part of me that my family had tried to tear open. Each story shared reminded me that I wasn't alone, that betrayal is common, but so is resilience. Back in my apartment later that night, I set the latest event program on my shelf beside my book. The skyline glittered outside my window, and for the first time, I let myself breathe deeply, without fear of it being taken away. I didn't hate Margaret, Thomas, or even Ashley anymore. Hate would have kept me chained to them. What I felt was distance, an unbridgeable gap carved by their lies and my truth. They had tried to bury me with falsehoods. They had tried to make me disappear. But instead I bloomed. I built a career, a voice, and a life too vast for their shadows to reach. And as I turned off the lamp, a smile tugged at my lips. They once called me a thief. But the only thing I ever stole was my freedom, and I was never giving it back. Thank you for listening to my story. If my journey touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to Revenge Repeat for more true stories of betrayal, justice, and powerful revenge. Your support means the world to me, and I'll see you in the next story.